Diablo 4 is nearly upon us, and a good many people are yet undecided on purchasing the game, which is entirely understandable due to recent slights by Blizzard.
Have any plans at the moment to do PC?
So I decided to put together this list of observations to hopefully help many an undecided consumer to come to a more assured conclusion based on my experiences from the game's betas and released information. So here are 10 things you need to know before you buy Diablo 4. Now, I do want to make an aside before we get into the list. A quick nod to microtransactions begs to be mentioned, especially after Diablo Immortal's debacle. And while we are yet to see actual pay-for-power options, we have heard from the devs that there are no pay-for-power options that will be available in the in-game store, which does vary from the language used by the Immortal team leading up to the game's launch, where they stated you couldn't buy power directly. This is a very different set of semantics. Even the Premium Battle Pass only carries cosmetics and premium currency used to purchase other cosmetics. Whether or not Blizzard will fall back on their word is yet to be seen, and fans should remain skeptical about pay to win. But as for now, there is no sign of this happening. So, on to happier features, let's get into the list. It's evident the developers of Diablo 4 have attempted to take the best parts of previous titles while forsaking the others. And while many a Diablo 2 aficionado may be happy to see a return to skill trees, unfortunately gone are the days still of potion chugging to restore mana and/or health. Instead, while there are still varied and upgradable, even craftable potions, the amount that can be used are very limited and can only be restored with potion charges obtained from either defeating enemies or bringing a boss down a percentage of their health. Likewise, some may find this a positive change, while the lack of quick, accessible runes to alter your build without expending resources is quite a drag. However, the return to skill ranks allows focus on certain abilities, in both effectiveness and form. And in creating a more free-form skill tree, you no longer have to dedicate points down a specific line to create the build you want. And the Paragon board is much more varied and easily manipulated by the player than the more simplistic version in Diablo 3. Additionally, you can focus more heavily on certain abilities by playing with the affix allocation of your legendaries using the occultist NPCs, unlike the more rigid systems of Diablo 3, though there are things to be said about the character creation system versus that of, say, Diablo Immortal, but weigh that as you will. Did you enjoy the bright colours and Warcraft-like character design of Diablo 3? No, neither did we. And it's gone. I do know some people who are happy to trade the darker tones and theming for a more bright coloration with flashy skills and abilities in Diablo 3 and Immortal for gameplay's sake, sacrificing the tone. But the developers have, in my opinion, made the wise choice of, in their words, returning to darkness in Diablo 4. Speaking of which, Diablo 4 harkens back to the early days of the franchise, with darker, more subdued hues and melancholic symphonies accompanying your travels throughout a bleak and dying world. Instead of a world that looks like it's attempting to recover from the devastation wrought by the Archangel Malthael, Diablo 4's world is stuck in a steadily declining state of futility. Even the seemingly uplifting acts of Inarius are backed by terror and death. And are quite questionable, to be sure. And Lilith. While it seems incredibly noble that she is once again attempting to raise her children to their once amazing heights of power, we see her turn them to debauchery and sin, embracing kidnapping, murder. Thematically, there is very little in the way of a positive outlook within the story thus far. And that's more on par with what we've come to expect from, say, Diablo 1 and 2, which many fans of the original duo, thanks to Blizzard North, should enjoy, while fans of the later titles may not. The Paladin, the archetypical holy warrior to meet the darkness head-on, or any offshoot thereof, will not be returning despite many possible leaks and outpouring of sentiment from the community, myself included. It's the best class. Anyway, this has all been but confirmed by the developers and merited a very cheeky response from Rod Ferguson recently on Twitter. Now, while some may be a bit surprised by this, that we didn't get a Paladin on launch and we got the whole Crusader treatment again, we were given a few hints at this possibility back in 2019.
The truth is, we are not going to be just dark. we want to bring back this very, very specific vibe that makes Diablo unique. And it's not only about darkness. So this is very, very important for us because it impacts almost every layer of the game. There is always something evil. And evil in Diablo is glorious, unconquered. But actually, this is a good occasion to talk a little bit about the religious themes and this Gnostic atmosphere of Diablo. We call this guy a blood bishop. So he was a bishop probably before, and he committed a lot of evil things, and now he's, blood bishop like this. So we don't want just to spread crosses and monsters all around the sanctuary, but the way people imagined hell in Middle Ages, that's something that really inspires us here. And this Gnostic way of thinking that sanctuary is a place of misery, decay, and suffering. This is very, very important theme for us.
And as previously mentioned, the world is meant to be bleak and hopeless, which would arguably be offset by the presence of a warrior dedicated to the light. This was also the root of cause of the decision to bring back instead the Necromancer, as confirmed by Rod Ferguson and Joe Shelley, in addition to a few other reasons. There are also deeper lore reasonings why the presence of one of the church's divine knights would not exactly work in this particular world state. The Cathedral of Light is back under the rule of the angel Inarius, and while the Zack Room can be seen in various locations, it's also seen not far from a cell of Triune adherents, leaving one to believe that the Triune is using the Zack Room as a shell to hide their devious activities in opposition to the Cathedral, just as they did 3,000 years before during the Sin War. And while this was the storyline of the Paladin in D2, thanks to the machinations of Mephisto, the Zack Room were far less in the gutter than their current state in Diablo 4, so perhaps in the future with the DLC. Trading in Diablo 4 is conspicuously far more limited than any other of the main titles. You can only trade a select few categories, including gold, gems, elixirs, and gear ranging from common to rare. However, unique or legendary items and other in-game currencies beside gold cannot be traded between players. And with the exception of legendaries, it's honestly kind of a downer. However, legendary affixes can be found on a good variety of items and be used to augment a rare with a desired set of affixes to become a legendary item itself. So, while a tad more tedious than just trading over a legendary, you can, for all intents and purposes, trade a rare and create the legendary yourself. Now, it's not nearly as restrictive as not being able to trade even more powerful gear between players. PvP, thankfully, makes a return in Diablo 4 as well, and is actually much more rewarding than just collecting ears of farm bots and griefing players with possibly ban-worthy names. Not only are we given a lore reasoning, which makes me quite happy, but it's also feasible in obtaining gear and an alternative playstyle. So you can get cool and even powerful gear by engaging in PvP, instead of just grinding out PvE, which is refreshing for players who prefer that aspect of play. And no, powerful gear is not limited to PvP, so you can gear up outside of PvP and still come into PvP from PvE and not be a total scrub. I promise, no more acronyms for a little while. Even among early speculations, it seems there's no sign of Diablo's immediate appearance in the base game. In fact, revealed lore hints at the current end boss giving way to the rise of Diablo, and instead we're more likely to see Mephisto first. And yes, a Diablo game is arguably not a Diablo game without Diablo, but the strongest bosses in the game series thus far have always come after Diablo was defeated, such as Baal or Malthael. So wouldn't it be kind of refreshing if we built up the big bad to beat Diablo just one time? Would that really be such a bad thing? You decide. I'm not here to tell you what to think. Speaking of telling you what to think, the game is beset once again by an overarching plot guided by a prophecy revealed earlier on in-game. which is set to unfold and clarify throughout the events themselves. While we've done a fairly in-depth speculative video on this plot, there is still a ways to go before we see the truth come to light and the finer points filled in. Luckily, it's less than 3 weeks away at the time of this video's release, and we're about to get our answers if indeed Inarius' interpretation of the prophecy that he is the Spear of Light, piercing hatred's heart being Lilith, or if it's going to go horribly wrong. Hopefully this video helps and you took something away from it. I know this content isn't quite in the wheelhouse of lore, but in order to support the continuing story of a game, we have to decide whether or not we want to support a game company. And having information like this is helpful, and so I hope it helps you, the community. So, thanks for watching, and until next time, Traveler.
Sister, no!
No! No! How is she still fighting? Impossible!